Well, good evening. Thursday evening again. I wanted to share a little story with you about Samson. We've heard about Samson since we were children. Many of us have, and I just want to share with you about where Samson drew his strength from. Okay. When Samson was born, the Philistines were ruling Israel. The Philistines, and I hope you can see this. I have some pictures. They may not be big enough. I don't know. But Philistia is right in here, which is in the Gaza Strip now. Israel's here. Later on, you'll hear about the Solek Valley, which is right here. It's about halfway between the Philistine lands and the tribe of Dan up here. So you hear about that. Just to give you some context, when Samson was born, his mother pledged him to God, dedicated him to God. The angel of God had said to her that no razor was ever to touch his head, so that he was going to be a Nazirite. Nazirites never cut their hair for as long as they keep their vow. 3 people in the Bible were lifelong Nazarites: Samuel, John the Baptist, and Samson. You can see how long their beard gets and how long their hair gets. It's in their hair that they keep their pledge and dedication to God, so their strength is really in their hair. Well, Samson saw a woman that he fell in love with. She was a Philistine woman, and he just had to have her. So he made his parents go with him to claim this woman in a land called Timnah. And on the way, Samson used his strength. The Lord gave him this strength, as he told his mother, because that he would begin with Samson, freeing the Israelites, his people, from the Philistines. And along the way, a young lion, we're told, ran out and was trying to attack them, and Samson's strength was so overwhelming that he took that lion and just ripped it apart with his bare hands, we're told. And so, anyway, Samson married that woman, and things didn't work out. The Philistines knew of Samson's strength and wanted to do away with him. They tried many times to kill him. And so later on, they took Samson's wife and gave her to his friend. And Samson became very angry, as you might imagine. And so, to get even, to get his revenge with the Philistines, he and his party went out, and I don't know how well you can see that, but they rounded up 300 fox. And then they took the fox and tied their tails together, and they put a torch between their tails. And then they took them to the crops of the Philistines and let them run through the crops, thus burning down all the shocks and all the grain, so that it burned up the fields. And the Philistines, as you might imagine, became very, very angry, and they went and found out that it was Samson that did that. And so they burned to death his wife and his father. And then they tried to round up Samson. 3,000 men of Judea went to Samson and said, "We're going to have to bind you up, because what you did is against the Philistines, and the Philistines are our rulers now, and we have to obey them." And Samson agreed to let them bind him up if they didn't kill him, but handed him over to the Philistines. And so they handed him over to the Philistines, and the Philistines got ready to do some things to him. And Samson saw, here it is up here if you can see it, Samson saw a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and he picked it up. And he began battle with the Philistines, and some 3,000 Philistines were killed that day. And Samson said, you know, it's with the jawbone of a donkey that I made a donkey out of all of them. Well, later on, Samson then left the Gaza area, or the land of the Philistines, and he went up to the valley of Solak. And there he saw a woman and fell in love with her, a woman by the name of Delilah. With Delilah, the Philistines had approached her, and they promised her that if she could lure Samson into revealing to her the secret of his powerful strength, of his supernatural strength, that each one of them would give her 1,100 shekels. Well, a shekel, or 1,100 shekels, is about the equivalent of 28 pounds of silver. And if you calculate that by today's standard, 28 pounds of silver is about $6,100 thereabouts, at $15.75 an ounce. A lot of money, especially, I don't know how many Philistines were going to give her this 1,100 shekels. It doesn't tell us. A lot of money today. Was a tremendous amount of money in that day. And so she tried to convince Samson to reveal the secret of his strength to her. And she said, Samson, tell me, what is your great secret about how you can be subdued and tied up? Why are you so strong? And he said, well, I can be tied up with thongs. If you take some fresh thongs that are still wet and wrap them around me, then I'll be just as weak as anybody else. And so when Samson went to sleep, she wrapped the thongs around him, and then she said, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are coming. And he jumped up, and those thongs snapped instantly and dropped from his body. And Delilah was upset, and she said, Samson, you've embarrassed me, you've humiliated me, you lied to me, and you've dishonored me now. And she said, I really want to know, what is the secret? You can't possibly love me if you don't tell me the secret. He said, well, listen, if you take some ropes and you tie those brand new ropes around me that have never been tied around me before, then I will be just as weak as any other person. So Delilah had ropes wrapped around Samson, and the Philistines were hiding around the corner. And she said, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are coming. And Samson jumped up, and immediately he broke those ropes. And I don't know if you can see that picture there or not, but he broke the ropes. And again, he didn't lose any of his strength. He had lied to her again. And she said, Samson, you made a fool of me. Tell me, really tell me now, what will it take to subdue you? What is your secret to your power? And Samson replied, well, if you since he didn't shave his head, no razor touched his head, either his face or cut his hair up there. He wore his hair in braids, and he had 7 braids. And he said, well, if you take my braids and you weave them in the loom with the other fabric, and then you take the pin to that loom and you put it in there and you tighten it in, you push it in there, then I'll be just as weak as anybody else. And so while Samson was sleeping, she took those braids and wove them in with other cloth and took that pin and pushed it in there really hard. And again, the Philistines were hiding around the corner. And Delilah said, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are coming. And Samson jumped up and he pulled that loom up from the floor, and he pulled that pin out of the loom without any problem at all. He had not lost any of his strength at all. And Delilah said, Samson, now this is the third time you've lied to me. You can't possibly love me if you don't tell me the secret. You've made a fool out of me 3 times now. Now is the time that you revealed to me your secret. And she kept that up day after day. She just kept nagging him day after day. And Samson finally tired of it. He just couldn't take any more of it. And so he told her everything. He said, I'm a Nazirite, and no hair on my head has ever been cut. None whatsoever. I'm a Nazirite, and it means being set apart for God, consecrated to God, and I've been that way all of my life. If my head were to be shaved, my strength would leave me because I would no longer be dedicated to God. My hair was what made me dedicated to God. And so if I were to lose my hair, well, I would become just as weak as any other. And so Delilah went and told the Philistines, come one more time tonight, and I have found out his secret. And so they came and they hid around the corner, and Samson went to sleep on Delilah's lap. And as he was sleeping, you can see here the braids in her hair. She took and cut the braids off of his head, and then she yelled, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are coming. And he heard that, and he thought he'd jump up and just chase them off like he had the other 3 times. This time he had lost his hair, and with his hair went his strength, went his power. And so, since he had no more power, the Philistines overpowered Samson and bound him up and led him away. And then they gouged his eyes out to blind him so that he couldn't see to do any more damage to them. And they took him to a prison, and they put him on a grinding mill, and made him grind just like an ox, pushing a big grinding stone to cut things up, or to grind things up. And they thought they were done with Samson once and for all. Well, time went on, and they forgot about Samson's hair, and his hair began growing back, because his hair is what made him dedicated and consecrated to God. And he never lost his focus of God. And he dreamed about regaining his strength. Well, turned out one night the Philistines were having a big celebration to one of their gods, and they called for Samson to come and to entertain them, because Samson had been their big prize in their war with the Israelites and their conquest with the Israelites. And so they brought Samson, and in this temple there were many, many pillars. And they put Samson between the pillars, and Samson entertained them by doing whatever that entertained them. And the man that brought him in and led him in by the hand, he had this man stand him between the 2 pillars of the temple, the 2 pillars of the temple that were holding everything up. They were the key pillars of the entire temple that held all the rocks and the stones up there. And so Samson, regaining his strength as his hair is growing back, prayed to God, God, let me have vengeance one more time against these Philistines before I die with them. Let me have the vengeance for the 2 eyes that they took from me. And so Samson was placed between the pillars, and he stuck his right hand out and his left hand out, and he began pushing on them with all of the strength that he had. And as he pushed on there, I don't know if you can see this or not, it's a picture of Samson pushing on those pillars. the pillars began to give and collapse, and all of the stones and the rocks came tumbling down. The Lord had given Samson his strength one more time. And it's said that in death he killed more Philistines in death than he ever did when he was alive. Samson got his strength from the Lord. Where do you get your strength from? Especially in these difficult days. You know, we all go through difficult times, and I don't mean to trivialize that, but especially in these times, more than ever, we have some difficult times, and we need strength to get through these times. Where do you draw your strength from? Well, the psalmist in Psalm 121 writes that, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. And David lived a life of danger as a shepherd, always battling the elements and wolves and bears and lions and enemy and poachers and all of that. He writes in Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? Samson did not fear because the Lord gave him strength. We don't have to fear either because the Lord gives us strength.